I'm so glad to be with you here. Such an exciting and important summit. I've been working in animal protection as an activist, as an advocate, as a teacher, and as a writer for over 40 years now. And you would think that after such a long time, I'd have developed a type of emotional armor to protect me from the sorrow that comes with the horror-filled stories of what humans do to other animals. But I can't seem to protect myself from the grief I feel about the parrot crisis. And so, Netta, I'm with you, and Karen, I'm with you. The crisis, as we heard yesterday, is devastating to parrots across the world, captive parrots and wild parrots alike. The crisis is also causing so much suffering for humans, and the feelings that I feel now that Netta just shared, and that we all felt yesterday during the presentations and the videos, are reactions to the pain and shame and sorrow and anger and despair that emerges when we're made aware of or reminded about the horrible suffering and disregard that parrots experience due to the illegal bird trade, and also the devastation of their lives and relationships in captivity. And that is, I think, a real harm. And it's something that we have to support in each other, to see each other in the kind of painful experiences that we have trying to save parrots. But I want to suggest that shame and pain are more than just our reactions to these horrors. As we've seen, there's so many people who are motivated to do something with those feelings. And I'm going to return to this a little bit at the end. But I did want to highlight here how moving and motivating it is to hear all of your voices for all of the work that we're doing to address the parrot crisis. By turning to focus more on the impacts of the crisis on us, on humans, and on the environmental impacts, we can get a glimmer of human courage and compassion and conviction, particularly from those of you who are leading the way protecting parrots. And this growing community, I think, can provide an important model for encouraging more people to become compassionate warriors, to join those of us who spend our waking hours and also a lot of our dream time working to help save parrots. So I've developed a view that I call entangled empathy that I hope might be helpful in this endeavor. Entangled empathy is a type of caring perception that's focused on attending to the experiences of well-being and flourishing or suffering of another. And it's a process that blends together emotion and cognition, or if you think about that, feeling and thought, in which we recognize that we are in relationships with others and are called upon to be responsive and responsible in these relationships by attending to the other's needs and interests and desires and vulnerabilities and hopes and sensitivities. And the first step here is to help other humans see that parrots have needs, desires, vulnerabilities, hopes, and sensitivities. I mean, we know that, but a lot of people don't know that. And so importantly, we need to meet people where they are and help them to see and understand this important part of parrots' lives. The second step, and this is really important, is to appreciate that we're in all kinds of relationships with other people and other animals who also have feelings and thoughts and their own relationships. We're also entangled in various systems, economic systems, political systems, religious systems, environmental systems, and other systems. And all of these relationships, both to other individuals and within systems, constitute who we are. So to give you some more recognizable examples, I'm thinking, for example, of the One Health framework. That's to recognize our entanglements with with animals and the environment and other humans in the health realm. There's also social network theory that recognizes our entanglements in the economic and the political realm. And there's ideas about ecosystem sustainability that highlights the interdependence of humans, animals, and the rest of the natural world. And this too is another type of entangled theory. The recognition of our interconnections is central, I think, to solving so many of the problems that humans, animals, and the natural world are confronting. Once we acknowledge our interrelations, both near and far, with humans and with animals and the more than human world more broadly, we'll be moved to reflect on the quality of the relationships that we're in the hopes of making them better and more sustainable. Most people, when they're pressed, don't endorse the idea that they want to be in a bad relationship. I think one of the central problems is that too many people don't notice our relations. And when they do, they don't see them as bad. But if they were to acknowledge the relationship as a bad relationship, I think my experiences have shown, and I believe this to be true, that they won't endorse them. Now, of course, they may be motivated, I hope, to make them better when they do realize that. But some people, of course, will prioritize some relationships over others, as when, for example, the poacher risks his life to capture wild parrots to make a small amount of money to feed his family. Now, entangled empathy would not call for an uncontextual condemnation of that poacher, but would instead call for education and work for alternative income sources and opportunities for this individual and his family and others like him. It's trickier, of course, with the international criminal traffickers that we heard about yesterday, and of course with breeders also, which we heard about yesterday. It may be that they don't see themselves in relationships with the birds at all, but rather see the parrots as a commodity. That's kind of an economic relationship, I grant you, that's very transactional and also instrumentalizing. But changing those minds is going to be really hard. But importantly, and this is a point that came up really vividly yesterday too, changing the minds of people who purchase parrots may be more promising. And I think education here, helping people understand that you can't be in a good relationship with a purchased captive parrot. And that will help us hopefully end the demand. So in thinking about education, it's not easy, and I don't mean to suggest that this is a sort of, here's the answer. It's not that at all, but it's really important, I believe, indeed imperative, that we develop educational tools to help young people, to help teenagers, to help young adults, and even people as old as me, develop a better understanding of the roots of the crisis. And there are a lot of ways of thinking about how we might do that. Here are just some ideas: to be curious and encourage curiosity, to pay close attention to, listen to and watch others, and also listen to and watch ourselves, to develop narratives in connection with others, storytelling. There were some beautiful and also tragic stories we heard yesterday. But they were really powerful and really moving. And the other thing we need to do is be mindful and intentional about our language use. So, for example, birds should not be called it. They're he's and she's. And once we put those kinds of pronouns, if you will, on the animals, we can start to begin a mind shift. Similar with the word ownership. And perhaps controversially, maybe we could talk about this later, the idea of being a hero is another problem but I'll leave that for now. We want to interrogate our assumptions. What is the motivation that people have for wanting to, quote unquote, own a parrot? And relatedly, we want to watch for and evaluate for our human-centered or anthropocentric biases. One of the central things that I've learned in many, many decades of educating has been that we need to approach these situations with humility. And I realize that that is quite difficult when we're thinking about um, the what makes us furious about this behavior. It's hard to approach a situation with humility, but ultimately, if we want to make change, I think that's going to be important. Another crucial piece of the educational picture is to interrogate the ways that domination and oppression operate. And interestingly, over 40 years ago, a philosopher named Marilyn Frye introduced the birdcage to the philosophical world to talk about the notion of oppression. And I'm going to be very quick here because I want to make sure I have enough time. But the idea here is that oppression isn't just one bar on the cage. If it was just one bar, you could fly away. But oppression is a system that restricts and holds individuals back. It is experienced as not accidental or occasional barriers, but barriers that are systematically related to one another in ways that they keep a person in or an animal in an oppressed position. So what are we going to do in light of this notion? Well, I think one idea about thinking about oppression is it leads us to thinking about solidarity across not just different groups that are working to save parrots. Absolutely, that's crucial. But I think it's also important to build connections with other people who are combating oppression and injustice, people experiencing poverty, people experiencing marginalization or colonization, people who are exploited in their working conditions or don't even have working conditions, people who are forced into unwanted behaviors through violence, people who are forced to be someone that they aren't because of social or religious norms. The oppression and domination is everywhere. And that is, of course, tragic, but it also may be an opportunity for us to be in solidarity with other organizations and other groups of people who are working against systems of oppression and injustice. And I just want to say a couple of things about that. We don't need to agree completely with others to work together on a solidaristic project. And I think a lot of times in combating the horrors of the pet trade, the parrot trafficking and parrot breeding, we may focus too narrowly on that problem, which is a huge problem. So I'm not making a judgment, but I'm just suggesting that there may be a great opportunity to build coalition in solidarity with others that are fighting oppression. I think that when we are able to work together, we are able to start to think about our own, to go back to what I started with, our own sorrow, our own sadness, and talking about that with others is a really important way of bringing them on board. They might not initially be concerned about parrots, but if they're concerned about other people, if they're friends or family or would be friends or family, they may want to know what is so distressing to you. The idea is that if we are able to recognize and express our concerns, we may be able to get people on board. And I just want to suggest that I often ask my students to imagine, to use their moral imagination, to think about what they would say to their children or their grandchildren at some future point about what they did. If their children or grandchildren ask them, "What did you do, Mom?" or "What did you do, Grandpa?" when the parrots were going extinct, or when the orangutans were going extinct, or when the elephants were going extinct. My students are like, whoa, that's a kind of intense thing to ask. But it's the beginning of building a bridge to come together to fight so much of the problems that we're facing. Thank you.